Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Assalamu alaikum, dear students. Welcome to English Grade 11 video lecture series. Students, today we will talk about a student's learning outcome on reading and critical thinking competency. Now, this SLO is all about fictional text or fictional understanding of any text. Now, we are talking about story. Now let's see what the SLO demands over here. Since we are talking about reading, so we will analyze how an author's choice or choices concerning how to structure specific parts of a text. For example, the choice of where to begin or end a story, the choice to provide a comedic or tragic resolution or end, contribute to its overall structure and meaning as well as its aesthetic impact. So, this tells us that we are talking about fiction writing, fictional text, and especially we are going to see the structure of a story. We know that a story has a plot, and in plot, we have so many different variations. Now, we are going to see that how the author is choosing that where to begin or end a story. This is totally dependent upon the author or the writer, the storyteller or the story writer. Now, another thing is that how the story is going to end. Is it going to end on a comic relief, a comedy ending where everything is satisfied, people are happy, or is it going to be a tragic ending or resolution? This depends upon the writer of the story. So, why do the writer choose to start the story from the beginning, or how the story is going to begin, how the story is going to end? We are going to see that there are different ways of beginning a story and also ending a story. So, we are talking about exposition and resolution. Now, if you remember the stages of plot development, we have already talked about the different 5 stages of plot. Now, how are they going to contribute to the structure and meaning, and how is it going to leave an aesthetic impact? Now, students, the purpose of a story is to give a moral lesson. It is also for entertainment, and there are so many other purposes. And we know that there are different kinds of story writers. How do they start their story? How do they end it? Now, there are different ways. This is what we're going to learn today in this lecture so that you can analyze whenever you're reading a story, a fiction, you can easily analyze the choice of the author for beginning the story, how the story is introduced, where does it begin, and how does it end. So this beginning and ending of a story leaves a very good impact on the reader. We have our catharsis. It will leave a very good impact on us, and the message will also be clear. If the author wants the readers to end on a thinking point, on a tragedy, then that would be a tragic ending. And if the author wants to resolve everything with a happy feeling, with a very good happy ending, then that is also dependent upon the author. We can analyze these ways of the author, the choices, and then we can actually talk about the story, interpret it. We can also analyze it critically. Now, students, here is your vertical linkage. It links your SLO with the previous grade 10. A similar kind of an SLO was introduced in the previous grade. Now, what do you understand by a plot? Students, we have talked about it. A story, when it is told in a very organized manner, following a specific pattern, this is what we call a plot. Now, in a plot, we have different stages. Can you name these stages? Yes. Number 1, exposition, the beginning of a story. Then we have the rising action, where everything starts to rise. An action happens and the story starts getting interesting. Then we have the middle part, the climax. It is the highest peak and highest point of the story. Then we move on to the falling action, where things are going to the resolution or the end. Because, of course, a story always has an end. We cannot leave it in the middle. We have to provide a resolution, solve the conflict and the different problems that have arisen, the problem between the hero or the villain, the good force and the bad force. And then we end the story. Now these are the basic steps, the basic stages of plot. Now in this, we are going to talk about the beginning. I hope, students, that you have revised with me the different stages of plot. Now, what is the difference between a story and a plot? Now, students, everything that has happened, those events, they are taking the form of a story. But how do we tell the story? And what are the stages that we are going to follow? That is what we call plot. There are different stages, and there are also some story elements like the theme, the characters, setting, plot, conflict, and ending. Now, let's talk about the ending or resolution. Now, students, recall all the stories, different stories, fairy tales, folk tales, or legends that you have read. How did they end? Did they leave a very good impact? Some endings make us sad, and some endings of the story make us happy and satisfied. Now, what is your favorite kind of the ending of a story? Can you talk about it? Can you discuss it? Now, do this quickly, and we are going to come back soon. Now, here are all these stages: exposition, where everything is exposed to you, the introduction, the characters, the setting, the theme as well, and all those things. So it is our beginning. Then we have rising action, climax, which is also called the middle point, falling action, and then the resolution. We are talking about this part, the last stage of the plot, where everything is going to resolve and we have to conclude the story. The writer concludes the story, and it can be concluded in different ways. The various elements that contribute to a text structure, such as we have a beginning. Now, the beginning, the very starting point, is the way the story starts. For example, the story can start by introducing everything, the characters and their intentions and purposes, and the main idea or the theme. And the story can also be started in the middle of the action. Now, so first we have a beginning, we have a middle of the story, the development of the plot, characters and themes. Then we have the end. So beginning, middle and end. These are our three basic structure points that we have in a story. Let's talk about another thing, which is point of view, POV or narrative style. The point of view from which the story is told. For example, if the writer is part of the story, then it can be started from the first person view. The first person narrative, the story can be told from a second person and also third person, and it is divided in two types: third person omniscient and third person limited point of view. So students, if you see the story starting with the pronoun I, me, myself, then this is a first person narrative. The perspective is of the narrator, who's also part of the story. If the narrative perspective, the style is using the pronouns you, the second persons, then we can say that the narrative perspective or the point of view is second person, which is very rare, and the most the most used one is the third person narrative, third person point of view, which is called third person omniscient. If the narrator is uh, all knowing, and if the narrator knows everything about every character's feelings, intentions, and even at the end, then that would be third person omniscient. And if the narrator is only knowing about one or two characters, then we can say that this is third person limited. Now, another structure is the pacing of the story. The story is told at a specific speed. So, some stories are fast paced, some stories take time to build up the setting, the whole mood, the tone, and they are long, they are lengthy, and they take time. So, you can decide that what is the pace of the story. Is it fast? Is it telling everything in a fast way, or is the story having a slow pace where everything is included and the description is added more and more? So you can decide and you can analyze the story according to the pace as well. So we can talk about the beginning of a story, the middle, the end, the narrative perspective, and also the pacing, the speed at which the story is told. Now, students, if we talk about the writer's choice, the writer is having a free will that how he or she is going to start the story. Writer's choice to begin and end a story. The way a writer chooses to begin and end a story plays a crucial role, a very important role in shaping the reader's experience and the overall impact of the story. If the story is ending on a sad note, on a tragic note, then this will have a different experience of the author, of the reader. And if the ending is happy and joyful, well, where all's well and that ends well, so in this experience, the reader will have a good and happy feeling. So changing the ending, the beginning of the story, can leave a very good impact of the story on the reader. These choices made by the author influence how the reader understands the plot, connects with the characters, and interprets the theme. Now, let's say, how do we begin a story? Normally, the beginning of a story sets the stage for everything that follows. In the beginning, you will be introduced with the setting and characters. If there are three characters, they are introduced with their characteristics, their personality traits, their behavior, their evilness or goodness in their character. You can also be introduced with the setting, whether the story is set in a fantasy land, in another planet, in another universe, or it is set in a actually in a realistic fiction, in a realistic setting. Then the beginning or the exposition establish the tone and mood. What will be the mood of the story? Is the story having a pessimistic view, a negativity, or seeing everything in a positive light? So that is the mood of the story. And the tone as well. The kind of language that is used can also be considered. Now, at the very beginning, the story, the author will present the main conflict. Conflict means problem, the issue, because if there's no conflict, then there is no story. So, the author can choose actually to start the story with introducing you with the characters, the setting, the whole theme, mood, style, and tone of the story. Now, let's say there's another way of starting a story right from the middle, and this is called medias res, because the story is started from the middle, from the action. Let's talk about it. We have an example of an ancient Greek poet, Homer, and the work is the Odyssey. Now, this is a very famous story. It's a homecoming. The story starts with Odysseus, the main character, already on his journey home, rather than beginning with his departure from Troy. So actually, Odysseus is coming from Troy, but instead, Homer, the writer, the storyteller, actually started the story from the middle of the whole story, middle of the journey. Now, if a story is starting from the middle, this leaves the reader curious that what happened before, what is going to happen next. So this will be creating a curiosity in the reader. Excitement and curiosity. Now let's talk about the impact. If the story is started in the middle, this grabs the reader's attention immediately by throwing them into the middle of the action. If you throw somebody right in the middle of the action where interesting actions are happening, then the reader is intact and fully attentive, making them curious about what led to this point. They will be curious and thinking that how did the character ended up in the middle of the sea? What just happened? So, either the author or the writer, the storyteller, can start the story from the beginning in a very conventional way, in a traditional way, or it can be started from the middle as well. Now, in most of the stories, in some of them, students, you are told about the ending before, at the very beginning. You must have seen some plays, dramas, or movies where you are shown that the character is dead. Now the story goes back that how did he die? So you are already told the end. It means that this is also a style of the author, the writer, to tell you the ending first and then go back to the middle, that how did the character ended up over here. But the most common one is beginning the story with these information, these different kinds of information. Now, we have talked about the beginning, the exposition of the story. There are two ways: telling the story from the start or telling it from the middle. Now, let's talk about resolution. Why is it called resolution? Because the story is being resolved. We are having solution of the conflict, the problem, and we are resolving the issues. The writer is telling us how everything is closing up and leaving us at the conclusion. Now, resolution, which is also called ending or conclusion, it is the final outcome of events in the story. All those events, the rising action, the falling action, the middle, the climax, these are the events that happened. Now, what are the results of these events? This will be told in resolution. We have two kinds of resolution. Basically, the most basic ones are tragic resolution, comic resolution. Tragic means coming from the word tragedy, sadness, where something sad, unfortunate happens, somebody dies, a very great loss happened. And in comic resolution, when the story is ended on a positive note, on a happy ending, or comedy. So that would be comic resolution. Now, when we are analyzing a story, dear students, we can talk about the way the story ended. Did it end on a good note or a tragic note? Let's talk about comedic or comic resolution, the comedy ending, the happy ending. This usually involves a happy or satisfying ending where conflicts or the problems are resolved positively. Characters might achieve their goals, relationships are mended, and the tone is light or hopeful. So if two persons are in a fight, they become friends, they have a very happy ending. and everything is ending on a positive note. On the other hand, tragic resolution is where this involves a sad or unfortunate, unlucky thing happened, and this is how the story ends, where conflicts lead to negative outcomes. Characters may suffer losses, lose a loss of life, property, loss of a relationship, a friend, and etc. Face consequences or fail to achieve their goals. If the character fails to achieve the goal at the end, that would be a tragic resolution, resulting in a somber or reflective tone. Somber means sad. You feel pity about the characters, you feel sad, and you actually feel a pity for them, a sadness for the characters. And you might cry. At the end, the audiences, the readers are made to have a very uh, sad expression, sad emotion in them, and they feel sad when they come across a tragic resolution. So students, I would like to ask you that name two stories where in one you read or you have watched a happy ending, and in the other where you have watched a sad ending. Now, I would like to give you an example of Romeo and Juliet where they both die at the end. This is a play of Shakespeare, a very famous play, and it shows us a tragic resolution. But there are a lot of Shakespeare's plays, stories, where there are comic resolutions or comic endings. Now, here are some examples. Let's talk about tragic resolution. This is a story, The Sound and the Fury by William Faulkner. And the plot is the novel is told from the perspectives of 4 members of the Campson family whose decline and downfall are chronicled. So the Compson family has a tragic consequences, tragic ending. So this is actually it's showing us a tragic resolution. So if you read the story, The Sound and the Fury, you can experience a tragic resolution. Family dysfunction, mental illness, Southern Gothic decline, and tragedy. These are the key elements of the tragic resolution of this story. When we talk about comic resolution, we have a very famous humorous writer, Mark Twain's story, The Adventures of Huckleberry Finn. Now, the plot is that Huck Finn or Huckleberry Finn and his friend Jim, escaped slave, embark on a journey down the Mississippi River. And this story shows us friendship, adventure, social commentary, humor, and they have a very good ending. Their problems are resolved at the end. So this is an example of a comic or comedic resolution. So I would like to give you the task of reading these stories or either one of them, and you must read actually this one, The Adventures of Huckleberry Finn. It's a very interesting read, and this will add up in your reading recommendation, and you can read it and learn a lot from it as if we talk about storytelling. Now students, since we are talking about the structure of the plot, the beginning and ending according to the writer's choice, you have this worksheet that you will solve a couple of pages, but they are totally relevant to the main lesson. So go through this worksheet, solve it, and practice your storytelling skills. All these resources are added. You will get them once you are done with the lecture. So I hope students that now you're clear about an author's choice. You can criticize an author, you can write a critical appreciation, a critical analysis on any story. You can talk about the structure of the plot, the different stages, how they are written, how the story started, and how it ended in different ways. So in this way, you can talk about that what impact is it going to leave on the reader. So this is all summing up all of our students' learning outcome for today. Now it's time for you to read a lot, read different stories, go through fairy tales, folk tales, different plots of novels, different stories, to identify these elements, the structure, and identify especially the beginning and the end of a story. This is all about today, students. I hope that you have a happy reading, you have a great read. Till then, take care of yourselves. Allah Hafiz.